the mysterious collapse of the Bronze Age, when civilization ended overnight. The sun sets over the eastern Mediterranean Sea in the year 1177 before the Common Era. The waters glow with the color of molten bronze, and the world is about to change forever. Across this ancient world, cities pulse with life. In the Levantine port of Ugarit, merchants unload Egyptian grain. In the highlands of Anatolia, Hittite scribes record treaties on clay tablets. On the Greek mainland, Mycenaean kings count their wealth in massive stores of bronze weapons and precious oils. The Bronze Age has reached its zenith. Trade routes connect 3 continents. Empires exchange letters as equals. Literacy spreads. Art flourishes. But within a single generation, it will all be gone. Imagine a catastrophe so complete that the very art of writing disappears for centuries. Imagine a collapse so total that grand palaces burn to the ground and are never rebuilt. Imagine a world where international trade ceases, cities are abandoned, and populations crash by more than half. This is not imagination. This is history. The Bronze Age collapse stands as one of humanity's greatest mysteries. What could destroy multiple civilizations simultaneously across thousands of miles? What force could topple empires that had stood for centuries? And why, after the smoke cleared and the fires cooled, did the survivors forget how to write, how to build great monuments, how to maintain the complex systems that had sustained their grandparents? Tonight, we journey back 32 centuries to witness the end of an age. We will walk through the great cities of the Bronze Age in their final moments of glory. We will meet the people who saw their world crumble. We will examine the theories, the evidence, the mysteries that still puzzle historians today. And we will discover what happened when civilization itself hung in the balance. The story we are about to explore is not simply ancient history. It is a mirror held up to our own interconnected world. It is a cautionary tale about complexity, about fragility, about what happens when systems fail. It reminds us that even the greatest civilizations can fall, and that the line between order and chaos is thinner than we might imagine. So settle back. Close your eyes when you wish. Let your mind drift across the centuries to a world of bronze swords and clay tablets, of gods and kings, of empires and ordinary people who simply wanted to live their lives. Let us return to the moment when everything changed. Part 2. The World of Bronze. To understand what was lost, we must first understand what was. The world of the late Bronze Age, roughly 1300 to 1100 BCE, was unlike anything that had come before. For the first time in human history, multiple advanced civilizations existed simultaneously, and they knew about each other, they traded with each other, they wrote to each other. Bronze itself, that alloy of copper and tin that gives this age its name, required international trade. Copper mines in Cyprus produced the red metal. Tin came from far-flung sources, Afghanistan, Cornwall in distant Britain, or perhaps Anatolia. To make bronze, you needed both. This simple metallurgical fact created the world's first truly global economy. The Mediterranean Sea served as the Bronze Age highway. Merchant vessels with square sails and banks of oars moved between ports, carrying not just metals but grain, wine, olive oil, timber, textiles, spices, and precious goods. A shipwreck discovered off the coast of modern Turkey, dating to 1400 BCE, contained items from 7 different countries. This was a world of trade, connection, and mutual dependence. Let us tour this world, region by region, and meet its peoples. In Egypt, the new kingdom has reached its mature phase. Pharaohs of the 19th and 20th dynasties rule from palaces in Thebes and Pyrameses. The great temple complexes at Karnak and Abu Simbel have been completed. Egyptian power extends south into Nubia, where gold mines enrich the royal treasury. To the northeast, Egypt controls parts of Canaan and maintains diplomatic relations with other great powers. Ramesses II, who reigned for 67 years, has recently passed into legend. His son, Merenptah, now sits upon the throne. Egyptian society is highly stratified and ancient. The written language, hieroglyphics, has been in use for 2,000 years. The pyramids are already ancient monuments, built by dynasties that existed 15 centuries earlier. Egypt is wealthy, powerful, and secure in its identity as the center of the civilized world. To the northeast, across the Sinai, lies the Levant. This is a region of city-states and small kingdoms. Ugarit, on the coast of modern Syria, is perhaps the most cosmopolitan city of the age. Its harbor welcomes ships from across the Mediterranean. Its palace archives, written in cuneiform on clay tablets, record trade in multiple languages. Ugarit produces fine textiles, particularly purple cloth dyed with crushed sea snails, a luxury worth more than gold. The city's merchants are wealthy, and its culture is sophisticated, blending Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Anatolian, and local traditions. South of Ugarit, other cities dot the coast and interior. Byblos, ancient even in this ancient time, exports Lebanese cedar. Sidon and Tyre will one day become great Phoenician cities, but in this era, they are smaller ports under the shadow of larger powers. Inland kingdoms rise and fall. The Hittites to the north and the Egyptians to the south vie for influence. Local rulers navigate between these giants, paying tribute to one or the other, sometimes both. Further north and east, in the highlands of Anatolia, the Hittite Empire dominates. This is one of the great powers of the age, ruling from their capital at Hattusa. The Hittite kings control vast territories from the Aegean coast to northern Syria. They have fought the Egyptians to a standstill at the Battle of Kadesh and signed the world's first recorded peace treaty. Hittite military power is formidable. They perfected the war chariot, and their iron weapons, still rare and precious, hint at the coming Iron Age. Hittite society is complex and literate. The palace archives contain thousands of clay tablets recording everything from international treaties to bread rations for palace workers. The Hittites worship storm gods and maintain elaborate festivals. Their legal codes are detailed and relatively humane compared to other ancient systems. This is an empire at its height, secure in its power, confident in its future. But let us cross the sea to Greece and the Aegean. Here, the Mycenaean civilization flourishes. This is the world that will later be remembered in Homer's epics. The world of Agamemnon, of Achilles, of the Trojan War. Whether that war actually happened around this time is debated by historians, but the civilization that could have fought it is very real. Mycenaean palaces crown hilltops across Greece. Mycenae itself, Tiryns, Pylos, Thebes, Athens, these are centers of power. The palaces are fortified with walls so massive that later Greeks will believe they were built by giants. Inside, bureaucrats keep meticulous records in an early form of Greek writing called Linear B. These tablets record inventories. So many bronze weapons, so many jars of oil, so many sheep assigned to specific shepherds. This is a centralized, palace-controlled economy. Mycenaean culture is warrior-oriented. Their art depicts battle scenes, lion hunts, and athletic competitions. Their kings are buried in spectacular shaft graves and later in massive beehive tombs, accompanied by golden masks, bronze weapons, and precious goods. Mycenaean traders and warriors range across the Mediterranean. Their pottery is found from Italy to Egypt, from Sicily to the Levantine coast. The islands of the Aegean are dotted with settlements. Crete, once the center of Minoan civilization, is now under Mycenaean control. Cyprus, rich in copper, maintains its own culture while participating in the wider Bronze Age network. Smaller islands serve as way stations for trade and piracy. Beyond these major players, other cultures participate in this interconnected world. Assyria in Mesopotamia is rising in power. Babylonia maintains its ancient traditions. The Mitanni kingdom, once powerful, has faded. In Europe, beyond the Mediterranean, the Bronze Age is also in full flower. But these northern peoples remain outside the literate urban civilizations we are exploring. This interconnected world operates through a system historians call the Great Kings Club. The major powers, Egypt, Hatti, Assyria, Babylon, exchange letters addressing each other as equals. They call each other brother. They arrange diplomatic marriages, exchange gifts of gold and precious goods, and sometimes threaten war, but often negotiate peace. Lesser kings and city rulers maneuver within this system, pledging loyalty to greater powers, playing one off against another. The Amarna letters, discovered in Egypt, give us a window into this diplomatic world. Kings bicker about gifts. They complain that promised gold hasn't arrived. They request specific amounts of expensive commodities. They worry about the loyalty of their vassals. They share intelligence about threats and movements of peoples. These letters reveal a world that is sophisticated, interconnected, and carefully balanced. But this balance is fragile. The system depends on predictable trade routes, stable governments, and mutual respect for the rules. It requires that bronze continues to flow, that grain ships arrive on schedule, that tribute is paid, that treaties are honored. What happens when these conditions fail? Let us descend from the level of kings and empires to understand what life was like for ordinary people in this world. The vast majority of people in the Bronze Age are farmers. They grow barley and wheat, tend olive trees and grapevines, raise sheep and goats. Their lives follow the rhythm of seasons, ploughing in autumn after the first rains, harvesting in late spring and early summer, tending animals and performing maintenance during the hot, dry summer months. They live in small villages of mud brick houses. Extended families share compounds, elders are respected, local shrines honor gods of the fields and flocks. Most people never travel more than a day's walk from their birthplace. They speak local dialects. They may be dimly aware that great kings rule, that cities exist, that ships cross the sea. But these things are distant from their concerns. They pay taxes, in grain, in labor, occasionally in metal objects. They fear drought and disease. They hope for good harvests and healthy children. Yet even these simple farmers are connected to the wider system. The grain they grow feeds urban populations and palace bureaucracies. The wool they shear becomes fine textiles traded across the sea. The taxes they pay support armies and building projects, and when the system fails, they will suffer most. In cities, specialized workers create the goods that define this age. Bronzesmiths work copper and tin into weapons, tools, and luxury items. Potters throw clay vessels on wheels, painting them with intricate designs. Weavers work looms to create textiles. Scribes train for years to master the complex writing systems. Shipbuilders construct the vessels that connect this world. All of these specialists depend on the system, on trade routes that bring raw materials, on palace and temple bureaucracies that organize production and distribution, on farmers who produce the food surplus that allows specialization. The cities are impressive but not huge by modern standards. Mycenae, one of the greatest cities, may have housed 5,000 people within its walls. Ugarit was larger, perhaps 10 to 15,000. These numbers seem small, but these were complex urban centers with elaborate infrastructure. defensive walls, drainage systems, warehouses, workshops, temples, palaces, public spaces. Religion permeates Bronze Age life. Every culture has its gods. Egypt's pantheon is vast and ancient. Ra, the sun god, Osiris, lord of the afterlife, Isis, the divine mother. The pharaoh himself is a living god, maintaining cosmic order through ritual. In the Levant, storm gods like Baal compete with fertility goddesses. The Hittites worshipped the storm god Teshub and the sun goddess. Greek gods are already familiar. Zeus, Poseidon, Hera appear in Linear B tablets, though their myths have not yet reached the forms Homer will give them. Religious rituals bind communities together. Agricultural festivals mark planting and harvest. Royal ceremonies celebrate victories and coronations. Personal devotions address illness, childbirth, travel. People make offerings at shrines, food, drink, animals, precious objects, hoping to win divine favor. They consult priests and diviners about the future. They swear oaths by the gods. Religion is not separate from daily life. It is daily life. The dead receive careful attention. Burial practices vary by culture, but all show concern for the afterlife. Egyptians mummify their dead and equip tombs with everything needed for eternity. Mycenaean elites build massive tombs and fill them with goods. Even ordinary people place pottery and personal items in graves. Death is not an end, but a transition. Technology in the late Bronze Age is sophisticated within its limitations. The wheel has been used for millennia. Bronze casting has reached a high art. Architecture can create impressive structures, massive stone walls, multi-story buildings, complex temple roof systems. Ships can cross the open sea, not just hug coastlines. Agricultural technology includes plows, irrigation systems, and storage methods. But there are limitations we must remember. There is no iron industry to speak of. Iron is rare and precious, used for special weapons and jewelry. There is no coined money. Transactions use bullion metal, measured by weight or barter. There are no horses in Europe yet for regular use. The horse-drawn chariot is a military weapon, not a transport system. Glass is a luxury, made in specialized workshops. Most light comes from fire. Most power comes from human and animal muscle. Writing is perhaps the most important technology, but it is restricted. In Egypt, hieroglyphs remain complex and known mainly to trained scribes. Cuneiform, used across the Near East and Anatolia, is similarly specialized. Linear B in Greece is a palace bureaucratic tool, not used for literature or personal letters. Most people in the Bronze Age are illiterate. Knowledge is passed down orally. Stories, songs, skills, traditions. And yet, for all these limitations, this is a world of genuine civilization. Art is produced that will astound archaeologists 32 centuries later. Literature is created. We have Sumerian epics, Egyptian love poetry, Ugaritic mythological texts. Mathematical knowledge allows complex construction and trade calculations. Medical texts describe surgeries and treatments. Legal codes govern behavior. This is not a primitive world, stumbling in darkness. This is humanity at one of its heights. The climate of the late Bronze Age is generally favorable. The Mediterranean region enjoys warm, wet winters and hot, dry summers. The climate that will one day produce classical civilizations. Agricultural productivity is high. Sea levels are stable. Trade winds are predictable. Yes, there are droughts and bad years, but overall, nature cooperates with human ambitions. The population has been growing for centuries. More land is cultivated. More cities are founded. More trade routes are established. More scribes record more information. The trajectory seems to be ever upward. toward greater complexity, greater wealth, greater achievement. By 1190 BCE, this world has existed in roughly this form for more than 2 centuries. Grandparents can tell grandchildren that things have always been this way. The palaces have always been there. The trade ships have always sailed. The great kings have always ruled. Yes, dynasties change, cities rise and fall, wars are fought. But the system itself seems eternal. It is not. As we stand in this moment at the height of Bronze Age civilization, we must understand what is about to be lost. Literacy will vanish from Greece for 400 years. Writing will be forgotten. The art of building palaces will be lost. International trade will cease for centuries. Populations will crash. Cities will burn and never be rebuilt. Technologies will be forgotten. The complex administrative systems will collapse. Even the recipe for making bronze will become harder to maintain as tin supplies fail. And the question that will haunt historians for 3,000 years is simple. Why? What happened to end the Bronze Age? Part 3. The Gathering Storm. The collapse did not happen overnight, despite our title's dramatic claim. It was a process, a cascading series of disasters that compounded over decades. But there were moments, specific years, specific events, when the pace quickened, when it became clear that something unprecedented was happening. Let us begin in the year 1200 BCE and trace the path of destruction. The first tremors are literal. The eastern Mediterranean sits on active fault lines. Earthquakes are not uncommon, but around 1200 BCE, something changes. Archaeological evidence shows destruction layers at multiple sites across Greece, Anatolia, and the Levant. Walls collapse. Buildings burn in the aftermath as cooking fires spread uncontrolled. Some sites are rebuilt. Others are abandoned. Historians debate how much to attribute to earthquakes. Some argue for a seismic storm, a series of major quakes over a short period. Others suggest that earthquake damage, while real, was not the primary cause of collapse. The debate continues, but we know that in this period, the earth itself seemed to turn against civilization. More ominous are the reports reaching palaces about the movement of peoples. The Egyptian records speak of them. The Hittite archives mention them. Ugarit's final letters describe them. Later historians will call them the Sea Peoples, though they almost certainly did not call themselves that. Who were the Sea Peoples? This is one of history's great mysteries. The Egyptian records list names: Peleset, Cheker, Shekelesh, Denyen, Weshesh. Some of these names may correspond to later peoples. The Peleset might be the Philistines who will settle in Canaan. The Denyen might be related to the Greeks who Homer calls Danaans. But certainty eludes us. The Egyptian inscriptions describe them as coming by sea and by land. They are warriors, but not just warriors. They bring families, ox carts, possessions. This is migration, not just raiding. They are described as coming from the north, from islands in the middle of the sea. They are desperate, hungry, looking for new lands. But where did they come from? Were they displaced by the very collapses that they helped cause? Were they refugees from earthquakes and droughts? Were they opportunistic raiders taking advantage of weakening civilizations? Or were they themselves symptoms of a deeper problem, a catastrophic failure of the Bronze Age system itself? The evidence suggests all of these factors played roles. The Sea Peoples were not a single unified force, but multiple groups, moving for different reasons at different times, finding different fates. Some may have been Mycenaean Greeks displaced from their collapsing cities. Some may have been Anatolian peoples fleeing Hittite collapse. Some may have been Western Mediterraneans seeking opportunities. The picture is complex and murky. What is clear is that by 1185 BCE, the situation is critical. Let us read from an actual historical document, translated from its original cuneiform. This is a letter from the king of Ugarit to the king of Alashia, Cyprus, written in the final days of Ugarit's existence. My father, now the ships of the enemy have come. They have set fire to my cities and have done evil in my land. Does my father not know that all my troops and chariots are stationed in Hatti, and that all my ships are stationed in Lucca? They have not yet returned, and thus the land is thus prostrate. May my father be aware of this matter. Read those words slowly. Let them settle in your mind. This is not a historian's reconstruction. These are actual words written by a man watching his world burn, begging for help that will not arrive in time. The king of Ugarit explains that his military forces are deployed elsewhere, helping his Hittite overlords. His land is defenseless. Enemy ships have arrived. We do not have the reply from Alashia. We do not know if one was sent, because shortly after this letter was written, Ugarit burned. The palace was destroyed. The city was abandoned. The clay tablets in the archives were baked hard by the heat of the flames, ironically preserving them for modern archaeologists to find. Ugarit was never rebuilt. Its people fled or died. The sophisticated cultural center, the cosmopolitan port, the hub of trade and diplomacy, gone in a few terrible nights. The purple dyers never returned to work. The scribes never again recorded transactions. The merchants never again haggled over prices. Ugarit became a ghost, and Ugarit was not alone. Across the Levant, cities fall. Tel Twaini burns, Jabala burns, Alalach burns. Excavations show destruction layers, thick deposits of ash and rubble at site after site. Some show evidence of earthquake damage. Many show evidence of intentional destruction. Bodies lie unburied in the ruins. Valuable goods are left behind, suggesting that residents fled in panic. The archaeological record paints a picture of catastrophe. In Anatolia, the Hittite Empire is coming apart. The capital, Hattusa, is abandoned around 1180 BCE. The massive fortifications, the palaces, the temples, all are left empty. The population disperses. The empire that has dominated Anatolia for centuries simply ceases to exist. The last Hittite king of whom we have record is Suppiluliuma II. After him, silence. The archives end. The monuments stop being built. The Hittite language will be forgotten, not to be read again until modern archaeologists decipher it in the 20th century of the Common Era. What happened to the Hittites? Disease, invasion, internal collapse, civil war? The answer is probably all of these. Records suggest succession disputes. References to food shortages appear in late texts. The Sea Peoples may have attacked, but the Hittites also depended on the international system, on trade, on tribute from vassal states, on the complex administration that required literacy and specialized workers. When that system broke, Hatti broke with it. Let us cross the sea to Greece. The Mycenaean palaces, those centers of bureaucratic control, are also falling. Pylos burns around 1200 BCE. Mycenae shows signs of destruction around 1190 BCE, though it limps on in diminished form. Tiryns, Thebes, Orchomenos. One by one, the palace centers are destroyed or abandoned. Linear B-writing vanishes. The last tablets record ordinary bureaucratic transactions, inventories of sheep, distributions of grain. There is no indication that the scribes knew they were recording the final days of their civilization. The destruction in Greece is harder to attribute to outside invasion. There is little evidence of foreign warriors. Instead, we see signs of internal violence. Some palaces are fortified at the last moment, as if preparing for attack. Walls are hastily extended. Water sources are secured. But from whom? From other Greeks? From rebellious subjects? From desperate refugees? The collapse in Greece is particularly mysterious because it seems to be internal. The great palaces were not conquered by outside forces. They burned. But who set the fires? Were they accidents in the chaos? Deliberate destruction by attacking forces? Calculated arson by the inhabitants themselves? We do not know. What we do know is that after the palaces fell, Greece entered a dark age. The population dropped dramatically. Writing vanished. Large-scale construction stopped. Trade with the wider world ceased. Greece would not recover to Bronze Age levels of complexity for 400 years. Only Egypt survives, and even Egypt struggles. Ramesses III, who reigns from 1186 to 1155 BCE, faces repeated invasions. The inscriptions at his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu describe massive battles against the Sea Peoples. In year 8 of Ramesses' reign, 1177 BCE, the date in our title, a great confrontation occurs. The Sea Peoples have conquered Cyprus. They have destroyed the Hittite Empire. They have overrun the Levant. Now they approach Egypt itself, by land and by sea. Ramesses meets them at the mouth of the Nile in what historians call the Battle of the Delta. The reliefs at Medinet Habu show the battle in vivid detail. Egyptian ships ram the Sea People's vessels. Archers fire volleys of arrows. Warriors grapple in hand-to-hand combat. Bodies fall into the water. The Egyptians are victorious. The Sea Peoples are driven back. Egypt is saved. Or is it? Yes, Egypt survives the immediate crisis. But the effort exhausts the kingdom. The economy, strained by decades of warfare and disrupted trade, weakens. Ramesses can afford to build his temple, to record his victories, but these will be among the last great monuments of the new kingdom. After Ramesses III, Egypt slides into decline. Subsequent pharaohs are weak. The empire in Canaan is gradually lost. Trade diminishes. Eventually, Egypt itself will fragment into multiple kingdoms. The new kingdom, which has stood for 5 centuries, is entering its twilight. And Egypt is the success story. Egypt is the civilization that survived. But survival in diminished form is hardly triumph. Let us return to the question, what caused all of this? Why did the Bronze Age collapse? Modern historians have proposed many theories. Each has evidence to support it. Each also has problems. The truth, as we will see, is likely a combination of factors, a perfect storm of catastrophes that struck simultaneously and reinforced each other. Theory 1. Climate change and drought. Paleoclimatology, the study of ancient climates, provides disturbing evidence. Around 1200 BCE, the eastern Mediterranean entered a prolonged drought. Lake levels dropped. Pollen samples show decreased vegetation. Isotope analysis of ancient plant remains indicates water stress. This drought may have lasted for decades or even a century. Drought strikes at the foundation of Bronze Age civilization. Agriculture. When crops fail year after year, people starve. When people starve, they migrate. When they migrate, they pressure other regions. Conflict erupts over scarce resources. Governments lose legitimacy when they cannot feed their people. Tribute goes unpaid. Trade collapses as there is nothing to trade. Cities cannot support their populations and are abandoned. A Hittite text from this period, written to a king in Ugarit, mentions famine. It reads, "It is a matter of life or death. referring to grain shipments. Egypt sent emergency grain supplies to Anatolia and the Levant in this period, evidence that food crises were real and severe. But Egypt could not feed the entire eastern Mediterranean. And when Egypt itself faced invasion, those shipments stopped. Drought explains much. It explains why peoples migrated. It explains why civilizations that had endured for centuries suddenly weakened. It explains why recovery was so slow, because the drought persisted, making normal agricultural recovery impossible. But drought alone does not explain everything. Egypt experienced the same drought, yet survived. Some regions that collapsed show no clear evidence of drought-driven agricultural failure. And drought does not explain why writing was forgotten, why technologies were lost. There must be more to the story. Theory 2. Systems collapse. Some historians argue that the Bronze Age civilizations were victims of their own complexity. They had created a highly interconnected system: trade networks, diplomatic relations, specialized production, centralized administration. This system was efficient and productive in good times, but it was also fragile. Think of it like a house of cards. Each card supports others. Remove one card and others fall. Remove several, and the whole structure collapses. Bronze production required copper from Cyprus and tin from distant sources. Disrupt either source and bronze production fails. Without bronze, you cannot make tools and weapons. Without weapons, you cannot defend yourself or maintain order. Without order, trade routes become unsafe. Without trade, specialized workers cannot get materials. Unemployed workers become restless. Restless populations rebel. Rebellions further disrupt the system. This is systems collapse theory. It suggests that the Bronze Age civilizations had become so dependent on trade and specialization that when disruptions occurred, from whatever cause, the system could not adapt. It was optimized for normal conditions but brittle when faced with stress, and once the collapse began, it fed on itself. Each failure made other failures more likely. The cascade accelerated until the entire structure came down. Systems collapse explains why the recovery was so slow. You cannot rebuild a complex system quickly. The knowledge, the infrastructure, the trust, all of these take generations to recreate. And if the environmental conditions, like drought, persist, rebuilding may be impossible for a very long time. But this theory also has limits. It explains mechanism but not trigger. It tells us how collapse happened, but not why it started. Something had to initiate the cascade. What was that something? Theory 3. Invasions and the Sea Peoples. The traditional explanation focuses on the Sea Peoples themselves. This theory holds that waves of invaders, displaced from their homelands for various reasons, attacked and destroyed the Bronze Age civilizations. They came in such numbers and with such ferocity that even great empires could not withstand them. This theory has the evidence of Egyptian inscriptions which clearly describe battles and invasions. It has the evidence of destruction layers at numerous sites. It has the evidence of population movements, of new peoples appearing in new places. After the Bronze Age collapse, new groups emerge in the historical record, Philistines in Canaan, for example, who may be descended from the Sea Peoples. But the invasion theory has problems. For one thing, it is not clear where these invaders came from. For another, it does not explain the collapses that happened before the major invasions, or in places that show no evidence of foreign attack. It also does not explain why similar barbarian invasions in earlier periods did not cause system-wide collapse. The Egyptian and Hittite empires had repelled invaders before. Why did these particular invasions succeed so catastrophically? Moreover, the invasion theory risks circular reasoning. We know civilizations collapsed, so we look for invaders to blame. We find evidence of violence and migration, which we interpret as cause rather than symptom. But what if the invaders were themselves refugees from the collapse? What if they were not the cause, but fellow victims? Theory 4. Earthquake storms. The earthquake theory mentioned earlier deserves fuller exploration. Archaeologists have found evidence of seismic destruction at many Bronze Age sites within a relatively short time period. Some scholars, particularly Amos Noor and Eric Klein, have argued for a seismic storm, a period of intense earthquake activity across the Eastern Mediterranean. The Eastern Mediterranean sits on active fault lines. The African plate is grinding against the Eurasian plate. The Anatolian plate is caught between. Major earthquakes occur in this region every few centuries. A cluster of such earthquakes around 1200 BCE could have caused massive destruction. Earthquakes would explain why so many cities burned. Cooking fires and oil lamps, knocked over by tremors, would have started fires that spread uncontrollably through densely packed buildings. Earthquakes would explain why fortifications failed to protect. Walls that can withstand armies crumble before geological forces. Earthquakes would explain the timing, multiple civilizations experiencing crisis simultaneously. But earthquakes, too, cannot be the sole explanation. Some sites show destruction without seismic evidence, and civilizations had recovered from earthquakes before. Earthquakes could certainly have contributed to the collapse, adding stress to systems already strained by drought and migration, but they probably were not the single cause. The truth: multiple factors. The modern scholarly consensus is that the Bronze Age collapse resulted from multiple causes acting together. Imagine a civilization already weakened by decades of drought. Agricultural production falls, food becomes scarce, populations become restless. Now add a major earthquake that destroys key cities and trade infrastructure. Add migrating peoples, themselves fleeing similar problems, who put pressure on borders and disrupt trade routes. Add internal social tensions as the palace economies struggle to maintain control. Add the breakdown of international trade as ships stop sailing unsafe seas. Add the loss of specialized knowledge as scribes and craftsmen die or flee. Add the psychological shock of seeing ancient, powerful empires crumble. Each factor made the others worse. Drought created refugees. Refugees created conflict. Conflict disrupted trade. Disrupted trade weakened governments. Weak governments could not respond to earthquakes. Earthquakes further disrupted trade. The cascade fed on itself. This is not a satisfying explanation in some ways. We want a single cause, a clear villain, a simple answer. But history is rarely simple. The collapse of the Bronze Age was a perfect storm, rare, catastrophic, and nearly impossible to predict or prevent given the knowledge and resources of the time. Let us now take a slower, more intimate journey through the collapse. Let us imagine ourselves as witnesses to these events, seeing them through eyes of people who lived through them. Part 4. Witnessing the Collapse. The year is 1185 BCE. The place is Ugarit, that cosmopolitan port we have come to know. The sun sets over the Mediterranean, painting the water bronze and gold. In the palace, scribes complete their day's work. In the harbor, ships rock gently at anchor. In homes throughout the city, families gather for evening meals. Oil lamps are lit. Children are put to bed. The day ends as days have ended for generations. But on the northern horizon, smoke is visible. Distant fires burn. Refugees have been arriving for days, telling confused stories of attacks, of destroyed villages, of approaching enemies. The king has called for troops and ships. but they are deployed far away. The defensive walls seem strong, but they have never been tested. A sense of unease settles over the city like the evening mist. Let us enter the home of a merchant named Abdi Milku. This name appears in the Ugarit archives. He is a real person, though we will imagine his thoughts. Abdi Milku is middle-aged, prosperous. He has traded up and down the coast for 30 years. He has seen wars and pirates and famines, and each time life has continued. He has confidence in the system. Ugarit has stood for centuries. The great powers maintain order. Trade flows. Gods are honored. What could truly threaten such stability? Yet tonight, Abdi Milku feels troubled. His ships have not returned from Cyprus. Reports reach the city of naval battles, of ports burned, of ships that simply vanish. His contacts in other cities have gone silent. Letters go unanswered. The copper he ordered has not arrived. The tin shipment is weeks overdue. Without these materials, he cannot fulfill his contracts. Without contracts, he cannot pay his workers. Without income, how will he support his family? These are practical concerns, merchants' concerns. But they reflect larger problems. The trade network that has sustained Bronze Age civilization is fracturing. Ships stay in port because the sea is dangerous. Goods pile up in warehouses because caravans won't travel unsafe roads. Craftsmen wait for materials that never come. The system depends on predictability, on trust, on the assumption that tomorrow will resemble today. That assumption is breaking down. Abdi Milku's wife, Nikmadu, tries to reassure him. The king will protect them. The gods will not abandon the city. They have survived bad times before. They will survive again. She speaks these comforts, but her own heart is uncertain. She has heard the stories from the refugees, entire cities destroyed, populations enslaved or killed, the Hittite Empire itself collapsing. These are not ordinary bad times. Across the city, in the palace, the king receives reports. Scouts describe armed groups moving along the coast. Ships that do not respond to signals. Villages that have gone silent. The king faces impossible choices. His army is in Anatolia, serving the Hittite overlord. His navy is deployed elsewhere. He can call them back, but that would take weeks, and it would anger his overlords. He could appeal to Egypt, but Egypt has its own problems. He could try to negotiate with the approaching forces, but who are they? What do they want? How does one negotiate with chaos? The king composes letters. He sends messengers. He orders the walls inspected, the gates reinforced, the weapons inventories checked. He performs the rituals, offers sacrifices to the gods. He does what kings do. But there is a hollowness to these actions. He senses, though he would not admit it, that the old rules no longer apply. The world is changing in ways he cannot control. In the harbor district, a young woman named Balat Athtatu tends a tavern that serves sailors and merchants. She is 20 years old. Her father ran this tavern before her, and his father before him. 3 generations of her family have welcomed travelers, served wine and beer, heard stories from across the sea. She knows a dozen languages well enough to understand orders. She knows the gossip and news of the maritime world. Tonight, the tavern is less crowded than usual. The regular customers, the experienced sailors, have stopped coming. The ships stay in port. The few men drinking are mainly locals, speaking in low, worried tones. They speculate about what is coming. Some say it is a vast army, thousands strong, unstoppable. Some say it is divine punishment for some forgotten sin. Some say it is the end of the world. Balat Athtatu listens but says little. She is making plans. She has gold coins buried beneath the tavern floor, saved from years of business. She has heard that inland cities are safer. If the worst happens, if the city is threatened, she will take her family and flee. She does not want to leave. This is her home, her livelihood, her life. But she is practical. Survival matters more than sentiment. Days pass. The tension increases. More refugees arrive, overwhelming the city's ability to accommodate them. They camp outside the walls, creating a desperate shantytown. They bring disease. They compete for food and water. The social fabric strains. Then one dawn, the watchers on the walls see them. Ships. Many ships. Not friendly merchant vessels, but warships packed with armed men. They approach from the north. Behind them, smoke rises from the coast, more cities burning. The alarm is raised. The city mobilizes for defense. But there is confusion. Where is the army? Where are the king's forces? The walls are manned by old men, boys, whoever can hold a weapon. It is not enough. It will not be enough. The attack begins at midday. The enemy ships land north of the harbor, avoiding the defensive positions. Warriors swarm ashore. They are not a unified force, but multiple groups, speaking different languages, wearing different styles of armor. They have feathered headdresses, round shields, long swords. They are disciplined, but also desperate. They are fighting for survival as much as conquest. The battle is brief and brutal. Ugarit's defenders, outnumbered and unprepared, fight bravely but futilely. The invaders breach the walls. They pour into the city. What happens next is the ancient horror. The sack of a city. Buildings are looted, then burned. Resistance is crushed. People flee or hide. Some fight and die. Some surrender and are taken. The city that has stood for centuries falls in an afternoon. Abdi Milku, the merchant, dies defending his home. Nikmadu and her children flee through back streets, joining the stream of refugees. They escape the city but lose everything else: home, wealth, status, security. They will wander for years, eventually settling in a small inland village, living as peasants. Their grandchildren will not know how to read. Balat Athtartu, the tavern keeper, also escapes. She retrieves her buried gold and joins a group fleeing south. They will travel for weeks, facing bandits and starvation, before finding refuge in Egypt. She will never own a tavern again, but she will survive. Her descendants will become Philistines. The king of Ugarit likely dies in the palace, though his fate is not recorded. The palace burns. The archives, those precious clay tablets recording centuries of trade and diplomacy, are baked hard by the heat, inadvertently preserved for modern archaeologists. The last tablet records a mundane transaction, an allotment of grain to a temple worker. The scribe had no idea he was writing the last line of his civilization's story. Ugarit is never rebuilt. The site is abandoned. The harbor silts up. The walls crumble. Nature reclaims the city. Within a generation, it is a ruin. Within a century, even the memory of its glory fades. The people who fled to other regions lose their identity, merging with other populations. The language spoken in Ugarit is forgotten. The gods worshipped there find new names or are forgotten entirely. This pattern repeats across the Bronze Age world. Each city has its own story, its own details, its own tragedy. But the outcome is similar: destruction, abandonment, loss. Let us cross to Greece, to the palace at Pylos. The year is 1200 BCE, a bit earlier than Ugarit's fall. Pylos sits on the southwestern coast of the Peloponnese, a prosperous palace center, ruling a rich agricultural region. The palace at Pylos is different from Levantine cities. It is not fortified. The Greeks of this era seem to have felt secure, perhaps because the sea protected them, perhaps because the palace system maintained internal order so effectively. But this lack of fortifications will prove fatal. The palace archives from Pylos, preserved by the fire that destroyed them, give us a unique window into the final days. The tablets record a mobilization. The palace is gathering forces, assigning men to coastal watch stations, inventorying weapons, requisitioning bronze to make more spearheads. Something is coming, and the palace knows it. One set of tablets records the contribution of gold vessels from various towns to be melted down, presumably to pay mercenaries or tribute. Another records the deployment of rowers, hundreds of men sent to man ships. The palace is preparing for war. But against whom? The tablets do not say. They simply record orders. Send watchers to the coast, gather bronze, muster troops. The bureaucrats are doing their jobs, following procedures, even as the crisis escalates. This is what people do in the face of overwhelming change. They follow routines. They do what they know, even when it may no longer matter. The attack on Pylos, when it comes, is not recorded in writing because the scribes die or flee. But archaeology tells the story. The palace burns intensely. The heat is so great that stones crack, plaster calcifies, clay tablets bake hard. Everything of value is looted first. The bronze mentioned in the tablets is gone. The gold vessels are gone. Storage rooms are emptied. Then comes the fire. Unlike Ugarit, there is no clear evidence of foreign invaders at Pylos. No foreign pottery, no exotic weapons. This destruction seems to be internal, Greeks attacking Greeks, or perhaps rebellious subjects attacking their rulers. The palace system, which concentrated so much wealth and power in elite hands, may have generated its own enemies. After Pylos falls, the region does not recover. The palace system collapses. The bureaucracy ends. Writing disappears. The complex economy, with its specialized workers and redistributive systems, breaks down. People return to simpler agriculture. Settlements become smaller, poorer. Technologies are lost. The elaborate frescoes that decorated palace walls are never painted again. The fine pottery that was traded across the Mediterranean is no longer produced. Greece enters its dark age. In Anatolia, the Hittite collapse is more gradual but no less complete. The last known Hittite king, Suppiluliuma II, leaves inscriptions celebrating military victories. He describes defeating enemies at sea. He speaks of strength and power. And then, nothing. No more inscriptions, no more tablets. The capital at Hattusa is abandoned. The empire dissolves. What happened? We do not know with certainty. The Hittites may have been overwhelmed by the same forces attacking the Levant. They may have suffered internal rebellions. Their vassals may have broken away as central authority weakened. The drought may have made Anatolia ungovernable. All of these likely played roles. What is remarkable is the completeness of the collapse. The Hittites left behind no successor states. Unlike Egypt, which fragmented but continued, or Greece, where local kingdoms persisted in diminished form, Anatolia simply reverted to tribalism. The cities were abandoned. The monuments fell to ruin. The language was forgotten. When the Neo-Hittite kingdoms emerged centuries later, they were not true continuations but new formations that borrowed the name. An empire that had ruled for half a millennium vanished within a generation or two. The administrative machinery, the military organization, the trade networks, the religious institutions, all gone. It is as if the Hittite Empire simply decided to stop existing. Only Egypt manages to survive, and even that survival is Pyrrhic. Ramesses III defeats the Sea Peoples, as we have discussed, but the effort exhausts Egypt. The economy is strained, the military is stretched thin, the empire in Asia is gradually lost, internal problems mount. Ramesses himself falls victim to a palace conspiracy. Members of his own harem plot to assassinate him and place a rival prince on the throne. The plot is discovered. Trials are held. Conspirators are executed or forced to commit suicide. But the pharaoh himself dies, possibly from wounds received in the attempt on his life. The records are circumspect, but the implication is clear. Even mighty Egypt is no longer stable. Subsequent pharaohs are weak. Egypt enters a period historians call the Third Intermediate Period. The country fragments. Priests at Thebes become effectively independent. Foreign dynasties eventually take power. The glory of the new kingdom becomes a memory. But at least Egypt retains its identity. Writing continues. The language evolves but persists. The gods remain. The culture, though changed, survives. In this sense, Egypt is the success story, the civilization that bent but did not break. By 1100 BCE, the collapse is essentially complete. The international system has broken down. The great palaces are burned or abandoned. Trade has ceased. Literacy has vanished or retreated to a few centers. Populations have crashed. Estimates suggest a 50 to 75% decline in some regions. Cities have become towns. Towns have become villages, and many settlements have been abandoned entirely. The Mediterranean world has entered a dark age. For the next 3 to 4 centuries, we have very few written records. We have archaeology, simpler pottery, cruder construction, less extensive trade. We have limited oral traditions, eventually written down, that remember this time as an age of heroes and catastrophe. But detailed history vanishes. The light of civilization, though not extinguished, burns very dim. Part 5. The Silence and the Echoes. Silence settles over the ruins. Where thousands once lived, only wind moves through empty corridors. Where scribes once recorded history, clay tablets lie buried under rubble and dust. Where ships once crowded harbors, fishing boats occasionally appear. The monuments of the Bronze Age slowly crumble. Each year, more stones fall. Each winter's rain washes away more detail. Nature is patient, and without human maintenance, nature always wins. For those who survived, life goes on, but it is a harder life, a poorer life, a simpler life. Let us imagine a village in Greece, circa 1050 BCE. 3 generations have passed since the palaces fell. The oldest people vaguely remember stories their grandparents told of palaces and kings, of writing and great ships. But to younger people, these stories seem like myths. The present reality is all they know. The village is small, perhaps 20 families, 100 people total. They farm barley and wheat. They tend small flocks of sheep and goats. They make simple pottery, coarse and undecorated compared to the fine painted wares of the Bronze Age. They build with wood and mud brick. Stone is reserved for field walls and threshing floors. They have no writing. The art of reading and writing has been lost. Knowledge is preserved orally. Songs, stories, sayings passed from generation to generation. Some of this oral tradition remembers the past, but transformed into legend. The great palaces become the homes of demigods. Wars between kingdoms become the Trojan War, a conflict of heroes and gods. Real people become mythical figures, Agamemnon, Achilles, Odysseus. History becomes epic. This oral tradition will eventually be written down centuries later by poets like Homer, giving us the Iliad and the Odyssey. These poems preserve genuine memories, descriptions of bronze armor, of palace structures, of a world of kings and warfare. But they are not history. They are mythology. History seen through layers of time and creative imagination. Trade has not entirely ceased, but it is vastly reduced. A traveling merchant might visit once or twice a year, bringing bronze tools, salt, or rare goods. But there is little to trade in return. The village produces enough to feed itself with little surplus. Bronze is precious. Old bronze objects are carefully maintained, passed down through families. New bronze is rare and expensive. People make do with stone and wood tools when they can. Iron is beginning to appear. This new metal is not yet superior to bronze in quality, but it has an advantage. Iron ore is more common than the tin needed for bronze. Iron can be worked locally without depending on long-distance trade. Over the coming centuries, iron will replace bronze, giving its name to the new age. But that transition is slow. For now, iron is still a curiosity, a metal for prestige objects and special weapons. The religion has changed. The old palace cults are gone. The elaborate temple rituals maintained by professional priests have ceased. Religion is now more local, more personal. People make offerings at simple shrines. They pray to gods who have taken on new attributes and stories. Zeus and Poseidon and Athena persist, but their myths evolve. The gods are closer now, more human in their passions and failures. They reflect a world that feels abandoned by the old order. Warfare in this dark age is different from the Bronze Age. There are no great armies, no chariots, no palatial organization. Warfare is local, raiding between villages, feuds between families, small-scale conflicts over land or livestock. Violence is personal and brutal. There are no rules of war, no diplomatic protocols. Strength and courage matter most. But this is also a world of innovation. Without the palace bureaucracies dictating production, craftsmen experiment. Without centralized authority, communities develop new forms of organization. The seeds of Greek democracy, the idea that citizens might govern themselves, begin to germinate. The seeds of alphabet writing, a simpler writing system accessible to more people than Linear B, are planted by Phoenicians and will spread to Greece. The Dark Age, for all its poverty and violence, is not just a time of loss. It is also a time of transformation. The old rigidities are gone. New possibilities emerge. The world that will eventually arise from these dark centuries will be different from the Bronze Age world, in many ways more dynamic, more creative, more open to change. As we move further from the collapse, memory of what was lost grows dimmer. By 900 BCE, the Bronze Age palaces have been ruins for 3 centuries. They are mysterious monuments to an age that seems impossibly distant. People might make offerings at these ruins, treating them as sacred sites, not understanding that their own ancestors built them. The population is slowly recovering. New settlements appear. Trade begins to revive, at first locally, then regionally. Phoenicians from the Levant, descendants of Bronze Age coastal peoples who survived by adapting to maritime trade, begin to explore the Mediterranean again. They establish colonies. They teach the alphabet to Greeks. They carry goods and ideas. Greece begins to emerge from its dark age by 800 BCE. New forms of pottery appear, geometric designs, increasingly elaborate. Population increases. Small kingdoms form. The Greek polis, the city-state, begins to take shape. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and others will become centers of a new civilization, one that will eventually surpass the Bronze Age in achievement. But that recovery takes 4 centuries. 4 centuries is longer than the United States has existed. It is longer than the Renaissance to present day. It is an immense span of time. Generations upon generations lived and died in the shadow of the collapse, knowing only poverty and struggle, unaware that civilization would return. What became of the Sea Peoples? Some settled. The Philistines established themselves in southern Canaan, giving their name to Palestine. They maintained some cultural memory of their origins, crafting distinctive pottery and worshipping gods with Greek and Anatolian names. But they also assimilated, adopting local languages and customs. Eventually, they too faded from history. Other Sea Peoples groups settled in various locations around the Mediterranean. Some may have become the Etruscans in Italy. Some may have settled in North Africa. Some may have returned to their original homelands, wherever those were. Without written records, their fates are mysteries. The regions that suffered most, inland Anatolia, parts of the Levant, Greece, took longest to recover. Coastal areas, where maritime trade could more easily resume, recovered faster. Egypt, which never fully collapsed, gradually stabilized, though it never regained its new kingdom glory. New powers eventually arose. Assyria, which survived the collapse though in weakened form, expanded in the early 1st millennium BCE, creating a new empire. The Phoenician city-states became major maritime powers. In Greece, the city-states developed new forms of government, new philosophies, new artistic traditions. In Italy, Rome began its long rise. The Iron Age Mediterranean world was more dynamic, more competitive, less stable than the Bronze Age had been. There was no equivalent to the Great Kings Club. Instead, aggressive empires rose and fell more rapidly. Cultural exchange was more intense. Innovation was faster. In some ways, the collapse of the Bronze Age system allowed for the flourishing of classical civilization. But should we see the collapse as a good thing? Some historians have suggested that the rigid palace systems of the Bronze Age needed to fall for new forms of society to emerge. They argue that the collapse, however terrible for those who lived through it, ultimately benefited humanity by clearing away outdated structures and allowing innovation. This view is too comfortable, too neat. It ignores the very real suffering of the people who died, who starved, who saw their worlds burn. It ignores the loss of knowledge, of art, of human achievement that took centuries to recreate, if it was recreated at all. We will never read the books that were written in Ugarit and burned. We will never see the art that was destroyed. We will never hear the music, taste the foods, know the stories that were lost. Every collapse is a human tragedy. The Bronze Age collapse killed millions, destroyed cultures, ended ways of life. That it eventually led to new developments does not justify it or diminish the loss. We should remember both the tragedy and the resilience, the terrible cost and the eventual recovery. What lessons can we draw from the Bronze Age collapse? What does this ancient catastrophe teach us today? First, it reminds us that complexity is fragile. The Bronze Age civilizations created elaborate systems, trade networks, bureaucracies, specialized production. These systems were efficient, but vulnerable. When disruptions occurred, the systems could not adapt. Complexity without resilience becomes brittleness. Second, it shows us the danger of interconnection without redundancy. The Bronze Age world depended on certain key nodes, Cyprus for copper, distant sources for tin, specific ports for trade. When these nodes failed, the whole system failed. Modern global civilization faces similar risks. We depend on complex supply chains, concentrated production, global just-in-time logistics. What happens if key nodes fail? Third, it demonstrates that environmental factors matter enormously. The Bronze Age collapse occurred during a period of climate stress. Drought undermined agricultural systems. Modern climate change poses similar threats. We are arguably more technologically capable of responding, but we are also more numerous, more interconnected, more dependent on stable systems. The margin for error may be smaller than we think. Fourth, it shows that collapse can happen even to civilizations that seem powerful and stable. The Bronze Age empires did not seem fragile to those living in them. They had existed for centuries. They had wealth, military power, literacy, sophisticated cultures. They seemed permanent. They were not. No civilization is guaranteed continuity. Power is always temporary. Stability is always provisional. Fifth, it reminds us that recovery is possible, but slow. Greece emerged from its dark age, eventually creating classical civilization. But it took 4 centuries. Several generations lived their entire lives in diminished circumstances, never seeing recovery. Collapse is quick. Rebuilding is gradual. We should work to prevent collapse, not assume we can easily recover from it. Finally, the Bronze Age collapse teaches us humility. We do not fully understand why it happened. Despite decades of scholarship, numerous theories, extensive archaeological evidence, the full story remains mysterious. If we cannot completely understand a collapse that happened 3,000 years ago, despite intensive study, how can we be confident we understand the risks facing our own civilization? How can we be sure we will avoid similar fates? These are uncomfortable questions. They suggest vulnerability, uncertainty, risk, but they are important questions. The Bronze Age people did not expect their world to end. They took stability for granted. They assumed that tomorrow would resemble today, that the systems supporting them were permanent. They were wrong. We should not live in fear. We should not abandon the complex systems that make modern life possible. But we should maintain awareness. We should build resilience into our systems. We should create redundancies. We should address environmental challenges. We should remember that what seems permanent can prove temporary. And we should remember the people of the Bronze Age, not just their collapse, but their achievements. They created great art, wrote beautiful poetry, built impressive structures, developed important technologies. They loved their families, worked their crafts, sailed the seas, worshipped their gods. They were fully human, as intelligent and capable as we are. Their world ended, but they were not foolish or primitive. They were sophisticated, civilized, accomplished, and that makes their fate all the more sobering. If they could fall despite their achievements, so can we. But also, if they could recover in time, creating new civilizations from the ruins of the old, so can humanity. We are resilient. We adapt. We rebuild. We learn. We continue. Epilogue: The Long Sleep. The sun rises over the Mediterranean Sea. It rises as it rose 32 centuries ago, when the Bronze Age ended. It rises as it has risen every day between then and now. The sea is the same sea. The sky is the same sky. The land, though shaped by countless human hands, is still the same land. But the world is different. Where Bronze Age palaces stood, now lie ruins or modern cities. Where ancient ships sailed, now container ships and cruise ships cross. Where cuneiform tablets recorded trade, now electronic databases track global commerce. The specific civilizations are gone, but civilization continues. In the places we have visited tonight, Ugarit, Pylos, Hattusa, and others, Archaeologists work to uncover the past. They excavate carefully, recording every stone, every potsherd, every tablet. They preserve fragments of the Bronze Age world. They interpret, debate, publish, teach. The dead civilization speaks to us through their work, across the vast gulf of time. The artifacts rest in museums. Clay tablets sit in climate-controlled cases. Pottery is displayed with careful labels. Bronze weapons, once carried into battle, are now admired for their craftsmanship. The objects survive, but divorced from their original contexts, their original meanings. They are windows into the past, but windows with thick, distorted glass. The stories live on in strange ways. Homer's epics, drawing on memories of the Bronze Age, have been read continuously for nearly 3 millennia. They inspired Roman poets, medieval writers, Renaissance artists, modern filmmakers, Agamemnon and Achilles, Helen and Hector. These characters, based however loosely on real Bronze Age people, have achieved a kind of immortality through story. The Bible, too, preserves fragments of Bronze Age memory. The Philistines of biblical narrative are the Sea People's settlers. The great cities of Canaan mentioned in the Old Testament existed in the Bronze Age. The patriarch Abraham, if he existed, would have lived in the late Bronze Age world. These religious texts, revered by billions, carry echoes of the collapse. The Bronze Age collapse has become a parable, a cautionary tale taught in history classes, discussed in books and documentaries. It serves as evidence of civilization's fragility, a reminder of risks, a puzzle for scholars. The people who suffered through it did not know they were part of a historical lesson. They simply tried to survive, to protect their families, to make sense of chaos. But their experience teaches us still. As you drift towards sleep tonight, let your mind rest on these images. The Mediterranean Sea, eternally the same, eternally changing. The ruins on the hillside, where palaces once stood. The buried tablets with their messages from the dead. The sunrise over waters that have seen so much human drama. Think of the merchant in Ugarit, watching the horizon for ships that will never return. Think of the scribe in Pylos, recording inventories in the palace's final days. Think of the Hittite king, whose empire vanished so completely. Think of the ordinary people, farmers and craftsmen, mothers and children, who lived through the collapse and survived or didn't. Their struggles are over. Their world is gone. They rest now in the long sleep of history, remembered only imperfectly through fragments and reconstructions. But they lived. They loved. They feared. They hoped. They were human like us. Their joys and sorrows were as real to them as ours are to us. And perhaps, in some way, speaking of them tonight keeps them alive just a little longer, keeps their world for a few hours existing again in imagination, keeps the Bronze Age burning just a little brighter in the darkness of 3,000 years. The Mediterranean is dark now. The sun has set in our imagination's journey as it sets each evening on the real Mediterranean Sea. Stars appear, the same constellations the Bronze Age peoples knew by different names. The night is quiet. The sea murmurs against shores it has caressed for millions of years. Somewhere in those waters lie shipwrecks from the Bronze Age, ships that sank in storms, or were scuttled in battles, or simply grew old and went down. Their cargoes of copper ingots and pottery and precious goods lie on the seafloor, slowly being covered by sediment. Occasionally divers find them, bringing up artifacts that tell stories of trade and travel, of human ambition and human fragility. The waves above these wrecks do not remember. The sea has no memory. It simply exists, moving with tides and currents, indifferent to human history. This is oddly comforting. Our dramas, so important to us, are momentary ripples on a vast surface. The universe does not care about our civilizations. The stars shine regardless. The sun rises regardless. And yet we care. We remember. We tell stories. We build civilizations, knowing they will end. We create art, though it may not survive. We write history, though it will be forgotten. We love, though we will die. This is the human condition, to create meaning in a universe indifferent to meaning, to build in the knowledge of impermanence, to light candles knowing the wind will blow them out. The Bronze Age peoples did this. They built their palaces knowing, on some level, that nothing lasts forever. They wrote on clay and papyrus knowing that documents can be lost. They loved their children knowing that death comes to all. They kept faith with their gods even as their gods failed to save them, and in doing so, in living fully despite impermanence, they achieved something the collapse could not destroy. They proved that human beings are more than survival, more than instinct. We are creatures of meaning, of culture, of hope. Even in the face of catastrophe, we remain human. The Bronze Age fell, but humanity survived. Civilization ended and then began again. The darkness was not permanent. The light returned, perhaps differently, perhaps better in some ways and worse in others. But it returned. It always returns. As long as humans exist, we will create, build, learn, hope. This is the final lesson of the Bronze Age collapse. Not the fragility of civilization, though that is real. Not the danger of complexity, though that is real. Not the risk of environmental catastrophe, though that is real. The final lesson is resilience. The human capacity to endure, adapt, rebuild. The stubborn refusal to surrender to despair. The determination to continue despite catastrophe. Let this be your last thought before sleep. 3,200 years ago, the Bronze Age ended. Cities burned. Empires fell. Writing was forgotten. And yet, here we are. Here you are, listening to this story, understanding these words, connecting across millennia to people long dead. Their world ended, but the story continues. Your world, whatever it may be, is part of that continuing story. Sleep now, knowing that you are part of a chain of humanity stretching back through the Bronze Age collapse, through the Bronze Age itself, through the Stone Age before that, through the deep prehistoric past, back to the first humans who looked up at the stars and wondered. You carry that legacy. You are that continuing story. The stars shine, the sea moves, the earth turns, and somewhere in the darkness of the past, the Bronze Age peoples rest. Their struggles are over, their civilizations are dust, but they live in memory, in story, in the lessons they teach us about fragility and resilience, about ambition and humility, about building and loss. Rest well, traveler through time. Dream, if you will, of bronze swords and clay tablets, of ships with bronze-colored sails, of palaces gleaming in the sun. Dream of a world so different from ours, yet so similar in its hopes and fears. Dream of the end of that world and the beginning that followed. And when you wake, remember, civilizations rise and fall. The Bronze Age ended, but humanity continued. We continue still. We will continue. The story goes on. The sun will rise tomorrow over the Mediterranean. It will shine on the ruins of Ugarit, of Hattusa, of Mycenae. It will shine on the places where Bronze Age people lived and died, loved and feared, built and destroyed. It will shine on their graves and on our world. The same sun, the same light, connecting past and present and future. Sleep now, the story is told. The Bronze Age collapse has ended again in telling, as it ended 3,000 years ago, in fact. But the human story continues. It always continues. The night is peaceful, the world is quiet. Rest now and dream of bronze and stars, of ancient seas and timeless skies.